sort of statistics and figures, and that has its place, but it is not always the best way to get pitch, to get a successful pitch done, and to really hook people and get their interest in reading it. So one of the things that we've done pretty consistently, we always invite the media and or put out a press statement whenever we've got an event, because we know that visibility increases legitimacy and support. And we are really focused on the message, which is what Dana was alluding to just now, and being as repetitious as possible. I assume you all know, as folks interested in communications, that the more you repeat the message, the more it sticks. So we really try to do that a lot, along with picking the right messenger and thinking about visuals. Again, just, why are we doing media interviews? Conveying key messages to multiple audiences, and obviously trying to influence the story that comes out and make it as beneficial for visibility in Appalachian communities as possible. And also taking back power. So, one of the things we think about is if the press is going to do a story anyway, how can we ensure that the frontline communities we're thinking about and workers we're thinking about, have the power to tell their story and influence what ends up happening in terms of investment and legislation. And just, always thinking about the audience being the target and not the reporter, sort of using the press as a conduit. The importance of earned media. We're trying to control the narrative, influence in decision making again. And we know when we're trying to influence elected officials that they are pretty regular readers of opinion pages to get a sense of what their constituents are thinking. So it's pretty important to be in those spaces. And it's also a way to get media if we haven't gotten it in other ways. If they haven't picked up statements or covered press calls or reports we've put out. Just a couple of more impactful voices that we were successful in getting out into the public discourse over the last year. Pittsburgh's Mayor Ed Gainey had a op-ed in the Post-Gazette right around Labor Day, I believe it was. And Bishop Marcia Dinkins had a statement on the child tax credit. I believe that was in an Ohio paper. That's just a quick review. I really wanted to open it up and talk about who you all think we need to be talking to or talking to more, sort of, a conversation about what audiences we're trying to reach, or who are you all trying to reach, and what has your successes been, or, where do you think you could benefit from more collaboration or more help? Just interested in kind of opening it up here.
I'm going to ask a question. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Ready? Okay, so I'm fascinated with the idea of the storytelling and weaving that into the data component of the issue. Can you talk a little bit more about how to make that happen?
Yeah, I think we have to. It's tricky, right? Because the data component comes from sort of the academic researcher, folks who are working on this every day, but that's not what is necessarily of interest to the broadest audience. The way that we've tried to address that is thinking about what are really the salient points we want to get out into the narrative, and we have to sort of commit to 2 or 3 max, and just try to, if we're going to get more content out there in terms of data, then we need to get more pieces into the media rather than get more information into one piece, because we're sort of, the way I think about it is we're sort of shooting ourselves in the foot if we put something really dry out that doesn't get to the crux of someone's personal story, because the only way to change hearts and minds is to hear people's personal stories. I mean, there's just no better way to do it, and ultimately we're always trying to change hearts and minds. So I think you pick a couple of data that are really accessible and you kind of drop that into a storytelling piece, and hold on to some other stuff that might be great statistically to get out there, but just isn't the time or place, and it's kind of best to just hold on to it and get it into the next piece. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I think about it.
I'm not sure either. I have to think about it too.
Yeah.
Jody, can you share an example of a story that you've gotten out there that was well received?
I mean, I think the excerpt that I had there from the Reverend was in a West Virginia Charleston Gazette, and we heard about it from lots of people. And I would say, like, in a comparison between that story, which was very much about the Reverend's experience of flooding in West Virginia, his sort of personal experience and the experience that he had dealing with, his own community and his own parishioners. The comparison between that and sort of the more research-based op-eds that we've put in was pretty drastic in terms of feedback. So we just heard from more people. It seemed like it was, getting more visibility and read more. And again, I think it's just, an outcome of one being sort of a personal, compelling story, and one being a more of a litany of stats and data, which, has its place, certainly, particularly for influencing decision makers. So I think we really need to be thinking about what is the situation we're in and what kind of piece makes the most sense. But if we're talking about storytelling, it's generally going to be really helpful to have that first person experience. I can probably find that and drop it in the chat if that's helpful, Amy.
It would be, and I don't know that we were seeing your slides advance. So I wasn't anyway, and it was kind of it took a little while for me to realize it. So
let me go back.
Oh yeah, we can only see your browser.
Oh, really? You can't see the slides right now?
No, we just see Google.
Oh, well, that's not helpful. 1 second. How about now?
not yet.
1 second.
It says it started screen sharing, but it's not showing it yet.
Okay. Sorry about that. Hold on. I thought you guys were with me this whole time.
Well, we were listening so intently, and then at a certain point it became obvious that you were talking about a slide, but it was late in.
Yeah, okay.
So I have a case study that I would like to throw out and get some advice on how to handle it. Would that be okay?
Yeah, go for it. While I figured this out, please do.
Okay, sure. So I work with a faith-based organization in Ohio. I am from West Virginia, but my faith Ohio, and we are currently under siege from the oil and gas industry with injection wells and radioactive brine spreading on our roads in Ohio. And this brine comes from oil and gas waste. So we were contacted, we put out an article in our newsletter. I'm with Fact Ohio. Factohio.org is our website. So we were contacted by an individual who saw an article that we published in one of our recent publications about the health risks of oil and gas waste exposure. This woman was concerned because she was pregnant at the time of what she noticed to be some sort of discoloration in her water. And she ended up delivering a baby that had complications. After the baby was born, they had the water tested and they found toluene and benzene in the water at levels that were not healthy. The baby has survived. He's now a toddler, but is requiring constant and vigilant medical supervision. And so we wanted to share her story as an example of how people can get bushwhacked by industry. They had bought a little 6 to 10 acre farm, I believe it was, in Ohio, in one of the counties that's being heavily mined for oil and gas development. And they were not aware of any wells or activity, but apparently their own water supply well was affected by some oil and gas development waste. So how do we take this story then and match it or mesh it with the data and get the point across?
Do you have a specific call to action?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you have, is there something that you're asking to have happen? I mean, in the general sense, of course, but is there a specific ask?
It's really more of a, it's not really a call to action. It's really more about public awareness of the risks and how you have to protect yourself from those risks. Vigilance and activism, if that's what it's going to take.
I've got a couple of thoughts. Michelle, do you want to jump in first? I see your hand up.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, I'm on the road. Sorry, but thank you. I can't see who was speaking there, but from Fact Ohio, but I just want to thank you for bringing up that issue. I think it's a really good example of kind of what frontline communities are dealing with in Ohio and Pennsylvania, because they have they're doing so much drilling, so much fracking, and they have all this waste, and they are really running out of places to put this waste, and they're injecting it underground. It's getting into our water. It's causing all kinds of health problems because, you know, this waste has, you know, radioactive material and PFAS chemicals. So in addition to the toluene and benzene that you mentioned. But just one thing I wanted to mention that I think this group could consider, I think it's just in response to the question that was asked earlier, and that is, I think our policymakers are really an important audience to target with these stories with communications. I think industry does an incredible job of really penetrating every level of government, from our local elected, you know, local communities, local leaders, council members, you know, because that's where the permits lie. That's where, you know, that's where they need approval to, you know, to get these wells. I'm not sure about the laws in Ohio, but at least in Pennsylvania, the permitting is at the local level for the most part. But local, state, and federal policy level communication, storytelling, I think is really critical around these issues and presenting the data and also the stories and personal experiences to those policymakers and helping them to understand the other side to what industry is presenting. So that's all I wanted to mention, but thank you so much for having this breakout.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that feedback. And yeah, Ohio has really, their governor just opened up public lands to drilling permits, as well as deeming natural gas a green energy. Okay, yeah, that's what he's done. That's what we're dealing with in Ohio.
Yeah, I would say, Jenny, just in terms of sort of some like very tangible tactics, I would think about trying to get an op-ed placed in, you know, in an area in which you know that a influenceable decision maker, legislator lives. So being thoughtful about where you pitch and making sure it's a first person story, maybe helping this person you know, tell their story a little bit more if they're willing to sort of go public with it and really do a first person story. I would also think about even maybe before doing the op-ed, seeing if there's a reporter who's focused on the environment and or energy, who's interested in interviewing her and doing a long form story. You know, a lot of times reporters are thrilled to have suggestions on who they might interview for a deep dive story. And then the other thing I would think about is, is this person connected to any groups who are doing lobby visits with legislators, and or letter writing campaigns, and can really tell her first person story directly to decision makers in addition to in the public sphere.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And RA is available to help with some of that stuff too. I'm a communications consultant who works with ReImagine, and I help folks write stories like this and get them pitched all the time. So that's a resource that's available too.
Okay, I'll be calling you, Jody. Thanks.
I'll put my email in the chat here at the end.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Let me just run through this and get to where we're having this conversation. Amy, did you see, are you able to see this now, you all?
We can see it.
Okay.
Yeah,
And I'll
that's
drop the link to that op-ed and maybe a couple others in the chat as well. And I'll also make sure that Molly includes them in the notes.
Sweet. Thank you.
Yep. So I think we just talked a little bit about who we need to talk to, what audiences we're trying to reach. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? Okay, so in terms of what stories should be told and who are the best messengers, I think it could be worth talking a bit about who the best messengers are for some of the stories that we're telling. Any thoughts on that?
Well,
Or any attempts to get messengers unsuccessfully that we could talk through with you?
I will say there was an interesting question in the chat about asking telling stories without exploiting people's experiences, and I feel that what you said about having people tell their own story may be one of the methods, but just wanted to point that out that was there.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not savvy enough to be able to see all the spaces at once, so I haven't seen the chat. Yeah, I think that's really important. And, we do a lot of work with frontline community members. And so it's something that we're really mindful of all the time, is sort of centering the voices of those who are impacted the most, and not talking for folks. So I think it's a little bit of a fine line to both help get those stories out there by providing, the story writing itself. We might draft an op-ed, for someone, but we do try to interview that person first and sort of get their voice so that we're saying it in their voice. We're not deciding how they feel about something. We're just helping them translate their experience and their feelings into a written document that gets out into the public, or helping them sort of go over how to do a media interview so that when they're asked questions from a reporter, they're in a good position to really get their story out there and, get the message that is most important landed in front of the public. But one of the things that we never want to do is put words in anyone's mouth. So I think a lot of it comes back to the organization of all the groups who are involved and the connections they have to the community. And then getting those folks aware of and comfortable with getting their stories out into the public and just helping them facilitate that, but certainly not speaking for them. Always, we're always trying to center their voices. It's a good question though. Anything else in the chat? Let me just go. Yeah, okay. So talking about regional collaboration in terms of communications, can we just talk a little about what's worked for folks? What, have you had success getting stories out into the public, and if so, what worked to make it happen, or what did you succeed in getting out there?
I'm going to speak up because we've had a storytelling project as part of our initiative in Fact Ohio. We were interested in providing a health resource a mental health resource for people that have been affected emotionally, mentally, psychologically by the oil and gas development risks. And so we put together a storytelling project where we brought in some very competent psychology, mental health professionals to run storytelling groups. So it uses group dynamics, and it uses group support, but it helps people to get their story out, validating their story, validating their experience, as well as their emotional response to it, and then helping to support them if they need to get to other professional resources or use each other as group support. There's a connection there. We haven't gotten really all that far with it, and I'm interested in advancing it because of healing as well as communication about these issues, these risks, the damage done, if you will. So that may be another phone call, Jody.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, storytelling is key to all of this. If it's not the Facebook chats, it's the one-on-one conversation with people and hearing what their experiences has been that tends to change minds a lot more than sort of, some of the other antics that all of us engage in. But I think being thoughtful about, what our end goal is here always lands you on the importance of storytelling, in my experience.
Jody, could you talk about, or could we all talk about the use of social media in this communication endeavor?
Sure.
How to use it? What's the best way to use it? What are some not so good uses of it?
Are you talking about sort of from an organizational standpoint or a personal standpoint?
I think both. I think, sort of the interplay between the personal and the organizational. I mean, I'm assuming that organizations would take the lead on getting the information or the stories, whatever it is, to the social media platform. But then there is the personal component that I assume would need to be woven into that expose.
Yeah, I'd love to hear other people's stories of how they've been successful with social. The one thing that I will say briefly is we for as much evil as social media is, it's also a way to get visibility and media attention ourselves, self-generated, that we really didn't have before. And so, I think it's something we all have to use and be up to speed on. And I always stress the importance of using your messages. So, not just posting a link to something or assuming that your audience knows what you're talking about, but really using it in the same way you might use, the ability to submit a letter to the editor or an op-ed or do an interview. You want to think about what your message is and use social media to get that message out there. Go ahead.
Jody, as a follow-on to Jeannie's question about social media, for those of us who are in our 70s, that I haven't a clue, other than I use LinkedIn, but I haven't a clue how to get plugged into that community. And we have a very significant need for getting plugged into a substantial number of social media networks and people within them to help get our particular story and message out there. So how would an old, forgive the expression, fart like me learn about, or get connected into that community?
Do you have the option of recruiting and utilizing an intern by any chance?
Sure. Yeah. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit. Yes. In Youngstown.
I mean, that's how I would start. If there isn't budget to actually hire a communications staffer or a communications consultant, I would look to an intern. I still believe in paying interns, but it's obviously more affordable than a staffer. And if you can get someone who has been doing this all their lives, or is really familiar with social and comfortable on multiple platforms, that can be a huge help. I don't think that every person who is doing this work has to do all the things. You can do your executive directoring and let someone else manage the social media platforms, but what you can do with that person is talk through the messaging. We'll sometimes have folks come up with posts and visuals and put it in a spreadsheet so that we get a chance to look at it first and sort of approve it, and then they can go and post it. So you don't have to worry about someone out in the wild posting things that may or may not represent accurately your organization. You just make sure you always look at the stuff first, but let them do the creation.
And thank you, Jessica. As a follow-on to that, though, chicken and egg issue, even finding a intern that is knowledgeable about social media, how would one go about finding such an intern?
Collaboration with any universities that are in your greater region or even the state. The way that remote work works now, I think it's not necessary to have someone who's in your backyard.
Right.
And so it really opens up the recruiting. And I think you can post publicly. You said you use LinkedIn. That's actually a good way to do some initial recruiting for an intern. Send some emails to your network. I would create a job description first, and you can certainly look and see what are some intern communications or director of communications, Google around and see what typical responsibilities fall under that rubric. Maybe back it down a little bit for an intern, and because you're just starting out. So you would probably want to include things like the creation of some of these channels versus just managing them and creating content.
Great.
A lot of both undergrad and graduate programs require internships, if not all. So it's a great opportunity, I think, to get yourself connected with those folks who are always looking for work to do, and frankly, especially looking to do work around environmental justice and climate change at this point. And so, this would provide probably a pretty coveted opportunity for them.
Excellent. Thank you, Jody. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
One other suggestion around that, Michael, is junior senior partnerships. I have found that in my work since I retired, I'm one of those old farts that you mentioned. And I work with a lot of old farts, so it gets pretty stinky in my backyard. But finding youth that we can partner with one-on-one,
Yeah.
taking in a young person who has an interest in you and wants to learn, pick your brain, learn from your experiences, hear your stories, and then engage with them, regarding their social media expertise. I have found that that's a really nice way of, one, bringing them into the organization, but secondly, building on their social media skills.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jenny. It's a two-way street, right? You may not have the social media skills, but you've got the knowledge and the expertise to offer them, which is extremely useful for their future careers. So it's a good trade.
Well, I have a bit to share in that I'm a 40+ year entrepreneur out of Silicon Valley. So I, launched more than a half a dozen businesses and so on, and have considerable experience, in creating enterprises. But this world of TikTok and, Twitter and so on and so forth is all just totally new to me. Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate it.
It's kind of the old farts, new farts.
For what it's worth, I also did not grow up with social media or even a computer. So it can be learned, but it is certainly helpful to have young people around who have always been in and out of this world.
Well, in the 90s, I was one of the top IT trainers in the world, but that's, decades ago, and it's a whole new world now.
For sure. I'm still unwilling to do TikTok as much as possible. I try to hire younger staffers who are willing to do that.
Thank you again, all of you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to use this opportunity to bounce ideas or talk about things that have worked or not worked or ask questions. I put some prompts on the screen there if you want to take a look. And we could also talk about ways that RA itself can be helpful, you know, in terms of drafting. We can do things like draft op-eds and letters to the editor, or, you know, help prepare folks to do interviews with the media. You know, there's definitely a comms resource piece of this that is available. And I know because I'm the one who makes it available and does it. So I can help.
How does a community take advantage of that, or an organization? I'm sure you can only work with so many different entities. Like, what's the process?
You know, I think all of the organizations that are involved with ReImagine have their own level of, you know, sort of commitment and engagement. But if we hear that somebody is interested in telling their story, or an organization has been working with frontline folks who are trying to get their stories out there, you know, I mean, I'm available. I work directly with the campaign managers, and they just pull me in. And we've also done some, you know, helping with capacity. So, you know, if you're an organization that doesn't have a budget, that doesn't have staff, but really still wants to do some storytelling or get stories amplified, you know, we're here to just like provide some of that capacity that you wouldn't otherwise have. And you can email me directly. You can do it through the biweekly campaign calls that RA hosts. I'm on there some of the time, where you can just let the folks who are on there and running those campaign meetings know. They can hook me in.
Jody, I have a question.
Yep.
Has ReImagine Appalachia created any like key messages documents? I know there's the vision document, but is there any sort of distillation of that into some shared key talking points? I ask because from where I sit, in my organization, I'm working across multiple states, coordinating with communicators across multiple states. So having those key talking points, and to your point about repetition earlier and how important that is, we're seeing the messaging go farther that way by always having that kind of like core document.
Yeah, for sure. There are some, there are not as many messaging docs as some organizations I work with, but I think there's an opportunity to change that in 2023. I actually think that's a really good suggestion, that, you know, maybe RA needs to be the, you know, sort of like the core organization to ensure that there's a messaging document that's out and about and propagated to, you know, any interested party who's working on whatever the issue is, so that there is a bit more consistency. There are some messaging docs out there, but I think it's been a while. I think there was a lot around CCC and sort of like the initial work that we were doing, you know, a year ago or so on the infrastructure law, and probably less so more recently. So it's something that's a good reminder to kind of get back to that.
Great.
The other thing that we did for a while is we had a bi-weekly communications meeting, and we would invite anyone who wanted to join who was working on this stuff to that standing meeting every other week, to talk about the work that they were doing and ask for, you know, some cross amplification. So that's something we could start up doing again. The attendance ended up dropping off quite a bit, so we tabled it for a while, but we could certainly revisit that.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
There's an interesting question in the chat about using music as a mode of communication and storytelling and inspiration for the movement.
It's not something I've ever done, but certainly if there's interest, I think it's always worth considering new means of communication, new avenues for people who don't have or don't generally access the ones we usually use. So sure, I think that sounds interesting.
I'll share a story about using the arts in our communication. We just recently, in fact, Ohio just recently put together a poster, and actually it's our new kind of logo. And what it does is it depicts the spread of radioactive brine which is a waste product from oil and gas development. And it's really a problem in Ohio, and we've talked about that. But the piece was done by, again, a youth artist in our midst. I think she was an intern with our organization for a little while. She did a beautiful job on it. It's really wonderful. I don't have it here available to share with you, but go to our website, you'll see it, factohio.org. It tells a story on its own.
Yep. Yeah, I think videos can be really helpful, created by artists that are not just your standard, the standard way that you think about things, but are actually like done artistically and engagingly tell a story. And oftentimes it's actually kind of a shot of someone drawing something. There's a video I'll make sure that gets included in the notes from Ohio River Valley Institute that they just put out about decarbonization, that does that really effectively. They just dropped it, I think, last week.
I think another project that we've tossed around is holding an art contest. Again, this would help engage youth, maybe focusing or targeting it on youth to get involved in the issues, the projects, the problems, and solutions, but in an artful way, whether it be through music or drama or performing or visual arts, whichever.
Yep, that's a great idea. I just dropped that link in there if you guys want to take a look at it after this. Any other thoughts, concerns, questions, ideas?
Well, I'll
Okay.
jump in.
Yeah.
So just to build off of what Denise was saying, or to connect to that, I keep thinking about pride of place and sense of place, place identity. And I noticed in the work that I do that a lot of the time that those stories, they get a lot of social media spin, like dozens of shares in local communities that, as compared to a lot of other posts are the ones that really tie into pride of place and like sort of like pulling people's heartstrings of why they love living in this mountains, that sort of a thing, what they love about their community. And art is a great way of doing that too. So just to, Jenny, I'm thinking about what you were saying about, visualizing that with the brine.
Yeah.
And to me, the other side of that, or maybe the unspoken part of that, is this is being done to land that we love, so if you can find a way to reach people by making that connection as well. Just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely agree. It's I think something about Appalachia that tends to be universally true is pride. Sort of the ethos of pride and hard work, and tapping into that is really important. Join a band. Okay, there you go. All right, well, I dropped my email in there. I'm available to talk through ideas that you all might have, or problem solve, brainstorm, whatever works for you. But I think probably we're good. Yeah, we'll make sure all of these get dropped into the notes too. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jody.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Yep. Take care.